I'm embarking on an epic adventure. From spectacular natural landscapes to the busiest cities in the world.
China, a place to explore the treasures of an ancient civilization.
I find this really very special indeed.
A culture that has lasted for thousands of years and which continues to shape this great nation.
I've really been looking forward to seeing this. And to truly understand the secrets of a country's soul, I think you need to immerse yourself in its art.
Time for the journey to begin. Beijing, China's capital city, a hub of one of China's most important traditional art forms, the art of writing beautifully, calligraphy. For century upon century, artists have continually renewed the art of calligraphy by adopting new and innovative approaches. Is handwriting the ultimate form of self-expression in China? What can the art of calligraphy tell us about China? Beijing, the cultural center of China, and one of the oldest capitals in the world. When the Qing dynasty was founded in the 17th century, Chinese literati and artists began flocking to Liaoning Street to buy books and share new ideas. It remains a great place to explore an art form that remains as popular and relevant as it was all those centuries ago.
What the Chinese call shufa, or the way of writing, we in the West, we call it calligraphy, a word derived from the Greek, meaning beautiful writing. In China, calligraphy is an art form. It's one of the so-called three perfections, along with poetry and painting. And some even consider it the highest art form in the land. So yes, calligraphy, it is writing, but it's also very much a thing of profound visual beauty.
Rongbaojia, dating back to the 17th century, is a famous shop specializing in calligraphy supplies. Calligraphy teacher Xiao Geng has been here for over 40 years.
Just before we begin, can I say, I love everything about this in terms of the aesthetic. Well, you're right into the lesson. Okay, this is my brush, is it? You've brought your own down here. Can we do an easy one?
象形字，先教你象形字。我写了，你跟着我写。人还有人最简单的吗？也是最复杂的。
Here we go. You're actually laughing. Oh dear.
那像你这个是这个人字，你现在不用管它的笔画呢，你把它形找到就行了。我告诉你，一步一步写，然后你要用功的话，半年你就可以成为书法家了。
We got half an hour.
当然。
Okay. Thank you, Master. Okay, so this is
Okay,
ready? Oh, I did a flick. Yeah, just naturally. Hang on.
用笔太快了。漂亮。
You're lying.
太漂亮，太漂亮！我是你师傅，我能骗你吗？
Are these ancient Chinese characters?
对，然后是篆书啊。篆书这个中国文字你要记住啊，中国文字是为了记录事的，最后变成书法是因为把这字写好看了。 就是现在的书法，就像人化妆一样，长这边人长这样，然后要化妆一下，然后就美了。字写到最好的时候，是不是字本身了？是它每个笔画都漂亮了。
You're
我
very...
慢慢教你，慢慢教，你别着急啊。这是中国的羊字，也是吉祥的。
Sheep, character for sheep. That feels
不要紧张，不要紧张。
somehow appropriate. Okay.
好，继续。
Yeah, I will. Hang on. There. And then these two little...
这需要交定，交定。
I've passed the test. Good.
交定。
So
切好。
can I see you do it?
In a sense, Mr. Shao's insight into this art form seems to be that the meaning of each character has been weakened, making it all the more important to express himself in each and every stroke.
Arguably, they're as relevant when considering a free-flowing piece of Chinese calligraphy as they are when, say, looking at, I don't know, a drip painting by Jackson Pollock. And instead of individual words, the Chinese have what we in English call characters. And I think that's very telling, because if you were looking for an insight into the character of China, a distillation, if you like, of the country's soul, then calligraphy isn't a bad place to start.
Northeast from Beijing is the city of Shenyang, the capital of Liaoning Province. The Liaoning Provincial Museum has in its collection some very special ancient stone tablets and calligraphic works that once belonged to Pu Yi, the last emperor of China.
The artifact that I've come here to see is really very special indeed, because it marks this moment when calligraphy in China goes from being an elegant writing system to something that's valued for the very first time as a beautiful, expressive, graceful art form.
In the museum's heavily guarded vault, there's a treasure of ancient calligraphy from the late 7th century, the reign of the woman to rule China in her own right, Empress Wu Zetian. It's the collection of calligraphy copybooks in the Wansui Tongtian period, commissioned by Empress Wu Zetian herself. Very few have the privilege of getting close to this 13th century-old tongue facsimile. The merest breath could cause irreversible damage. Dung Bao Ho is one of the few who has access to this calligraphic gem.
As I understand it, what we're looking at here is something tremendously exciting. I think this dates from the late 7th century. And yet some of these pieces feel like those brushstrokes could have been deployed, you know, a matter of weeks ago, days ago even. I wonder if you could just explain where the so-called sage of calligraphy, Wang Xizhi, where his work is within this artifact.
这件作品呢，它一共有7个人写的10封信，前2封信是王羲之的作品。王羲之在《银幕帖》中说到，这个消息让我心情十分的悲痛，乃至于摧残。
But it seems like there's a subtle difference between the characters used in the letter mourning the passing of his aunt and in the one in which he's greeting his friend, because these ones feel slightly larger, there's slightly more space around them, and if you like, there's perhaps a slightly more sense of spontaneous energy to the way that the brushstrokes have been put down, the way he's using the brush. How do you describe the difference between these two?
这种痛字或者是这种构字，他写得很缓慢，可能正是在释放自己对姨母去世这种悲哀心情的这种倾泻。 第二幅中我们会看到很多字迹是连在一起的，比如说您看，而且它的用笔上更为流畅，呈现了与早年不同的风貌。王羲之，他在中国被称为书圣，他超脱了他那个时代，在用笔上都有了很多独特的创新，开创了一个新的书法审美的标准。这个标准一直到今天，我们也在奉行。
The fact that this has become a standard that's still in use today is quite extraordinary. But also this idea that he's introducing this new aesthetic understanding into calligraphy. This is the birth of calligraphy as an art form, rather than merely text as a vehicle for conveying meaning.
The beauty of calligraphy lies not just in the beauty of each individual stroke, but also in the fluidity of the lines, in the subtle handling of the space among characters. What's striking about the Tang Dynasty reproduction is that Empress Wu Zetian chose not to make calligraphic copies of official court documents or literary works, but rather to copy some ordinary private letters, not for the content of Wang Xizhi's calligraphy, but for this art form. Back in Beijing's Liaoning Street, 80-year-old Yi Sun Chuang is hard at work. This old man has been practicing writing on the ground, a simple and popular form of calligraphy, since he retired.
The one thing that's quite noticeable is that, your first line there, it's sort of disappearing.
Yeah, that's good.
Is it?
Yeah, then I write again.
Are you using a particular script here?
We call it 楷书, means very neat.
Regular.
I'm a person who like everything very neat, very regular.
Ordered.
Ordered, yeah.
Look, this is evaporating already.
Yeah. When it's dry, then I have to write again. I enjoy that. And when I repeat it, it's a way of improving myself.
And one day when you've perfected it so that you're satisfied, would you then try and set it down in ink on paper to be immortalized?
Maybe not. Many people encourage me to write. I say, no, thank you. No. That's, to write on the ground, that's enough.
Frankly, if I lived to be 1,000, I don't think I'd ever master Chinese calligraphy. It's so supple and graceful, with all of this rich potential for nuance and subtlety and expressive power and poetry. But at least I've come to understand why, in China, calligraphy is valued and respected so much as a visual art form. And ultimately, I think there's something rather magical about the idea that China's greatest artistic treasure, arguably, isn't a tangible thing at all, but something intangible, as ephemeral and abstract as writing.
Next up, a visit to an award-winning type designer who's finding new artistic ways to express Chinese characters in the digital age. Then an opportunity to view a masterpiece that represents the highest level of achievement in the fundamental basis of calligraphic art, brushwork. Calligraphy is a great way to learn about China and its art and culture. The old copybooks you can find in places like Panjia Yuan in Beijing are a great source of inspiration for anyone interested in calligraphy.
In our digital era of emoji rather than old-fashioned brush and ink, I'm really curious to find out about its prospects for survival in the 21st century.
Xinghang Ke, one of Asia's most creative type designers, is just the man to ask about the future prospects of Chinese calligraphy. What gave him the inspiration to start reinterpreting traditional Chinese characters?
They look really beautiful, these editions. What are the... Oh, wow, look at that. What is this?
它是2015年获得中国最美的书，是它里面记录的全是一些 就20、30年代和50、60年代的一些那个招贴和海报。
I think this is such a beautiful book. There's this real sort of retro appeal. I can see why this would be so inspirational to you in your work as a designer. What about some of these other ones?
教你如何写好美术字，它是很早以前出，现在已经不印了。它的售价是0.95元，其实不到1元钱。
I wonder whether anything from the history of calligraphy, things that are maybe centuries and centuries old, whether those scripts are inspiring to you as a typographer.
书法和字体设计，它俩其实是2个行业。我个人的研究方向可能是更偏向于美术字，就是属于方方正正，更偏图形化。比如说，就像刚才给你讲那个像猪啊，或者就这一类的，就是让大家看起来更开心、更快乐，并且更能明白它是，就是大众更能明白你在表达什么。
Do you have examples of your own work that I can see to compare, see how you're inspired by stuff like this? These are great. Okay, dust. I love it. Immediately, I can see some sort of lineage from this, created, what, we're talking 2,200 odd years ago. They're full of, sounds a bit trite to say full of character, but that's what they are. How much do you feel then that this great tradition of calligraphy in China is under threat today?
受威胁肯定是存在的，但是消失不会消失。现在中国对外开放，然后世界也都在关注中国。首先大家想到中国，可能就想到什么书法、长城、故宫这些地方。
Xing Hongke's creative work pushes the envelope in terms of contemporary type design. But boundaries were being pushed back in ancient times too. One particular work, produced almost 700 years ago, underscores the role innovation has played in this art form. This is the Forbidden City, the secretive center of China's dynastic government for nearly 5 centuries. Now, it is the Palace Museum, crowded with tourists.
But some of the 9,999 rooms supposedly within the ramparts of the Forbidden City are still off limits.
This highly influential work is by the painter and calligrapher Zhao Mengfu, an important figure in Chinese literati painting. This painting is very fragile and extremely sensitive to light, so it's only possible to view it for a few minutes at a time before it's returned to storage. Present at this rare viewing of the scroll is Miss Lu Ying, an associate research librarian in the Palace Museum.
I have that almost nervous excitement looking at this because it's so fragile and so old, and there's been all of this build-up, and it's so special now to actually have it here. And it's really just a wonderful work of art. I mean, it's very simple. And immediately what strikes me is the great diversity of the way that Zhao Mengfu has used his brush in different ways to create different parts of the painting. I mean, in places, it's clear the brush is very dry and he's dragging it. In other places, it's loaded with ink and it becomes much denser. He manages to evoke all of these different textures of the natural world.
中国那个绘画的那个核心灵魂就是一个笔墨，然后我们中国人常说墨分5色，用墨的浓淡干湿来表现一幅画的层次感。
It slightly feels as well that there's a soft sadness to the painting because it's very, very bare.
文人画主要是想表现出一种作者的那种比较可以说比较，他注重一些笔墨的表达和内心情感的抒发，注重可能作品中有一些那种多了一些书法的趣味，还多了一些文学的色彩。
Are you suggesting that for Zhao Mengfu, he's thinking that painting a landscape, painting calligraphy, they're things which aren't separate but somehow enmeshed?
对，这幅画最重要的、最特别的地方，就是因为它提出了书画同理同源的这样一种观点，而且并且把这种实践的观点运用到画当中。竹叶它主要是用提挑顿这样一种楷书的笔法来表现那个竹叶的一个俏丽。可以说，赵孟頫在整幅画中运用了不同的笔法来表现石头，来表现树和表现那个竹子。
I'm so glad that I could see this with you guiding me through it because, you know, before I would have assumed there's the landscape part, that's the painting, here's the calligraphy, here's the text, and no, they're completely enmeshed, and that's something that's just very distinctive to the literati, to this Chinese moment of art history, and I wouldn't have really known that. To connoisseurs of calligraphy, strange as this may sound, the meaning of the characters can be immaterial. Instead, quite often, fine calligraphy is valued for purely artistic reasons. So I find it quite helpful to think of each character less as a sign used in a system of writing and more as a miniature abstract painting brought into being by a brush.